Is Belgium ready for the GDPR?
Yes, of course, because the GDPR is already 2 years in the public gazette, so we know the law. Of course, there is a lot of work to do to really implement it, to concretize it, not only on the legal side, but also organizational, and also in the public sector, the private sector, there will be a lot of work to do. But in my point of view, it's not really a disaster, because everybody is saying you have to be ready at 100% at the 25th of May. Of course, it's not possible. And a lot of tools that are in the GDPR, for example, code of conduct, certification, have to be elaborated. They are not ready today, but they will be ready in coming weeks, months, and then step by step, we will concretize it, and I'm hopeful that it will work.
So what will change with the GDPR for organizations and for the public as well?
For the organizations, I think it's a huge step. They have to really assess all the data, personal data that they have in their files, in their dossiers. So it is a challenge to do that. They have to make a register. They maybe have to make a data protection impact assessment. They should take specific measures to protect data protection of their clients, of their prospects, and so on. The people who are working there. So it is a change of the mindset of a lot of organizations. So I think that it is quite a challenge to do that, but I hope that it will give also additional information to controllers, to processors on what they have and how they have had to handle that. So, and the second part of your question?
It was about the public. What will change for the public or for the users?
For the public, for me, it is not really very clear what will be the real effect. Of course, if you take into account the principle of accountability, that means that every controller, every processor should make really an assessment and make it public, because accountability means that you have also to demonstrate how you have taken into account the principles of the General Data Protection Regulation, how you have worked it out. But will this have an effect on the citizen? I don't really know. I'm a little bit afraid that it will be not really the outcome. But let us be hopeful. If you are reading Article 25, where you have the principle of privacy by design and privacy by default, that can have a very important effect on the services, on the means that are offered to the public. The public should now have a standard setting, a default setting of data protection, who is already on a high level. So that can have an enormous effect. If we are selling cars, we are not selling cars anymore who are not safe. Well, the products that will be offered in the information society should also be privacy-proof. And that will be, I think, can have an important effect on the rights of the citizen. And I hope it will be the effect. Yeah.
Which would you say are the greatest achievements of the GDPR?
Well, the greatest achievement of the GDPR is, I think, that you have the principles who are mainly the same as the directive before and even the Convention 108. But I think that the three most important achievements are, first of all, what was yesterday said by Professor Kasper. We now have a European united body, the board, who will decide, not only giving advices like today, but who can take decisions, who are binding for all European data protection authorities, for all European controllers and processors. So that's a very enormous step forwards. I think that is one of the most important achievements. A second important achievement is, let's say, the globalization of the competence of the data protection authorities and of this board, because it is enough that as a processor or a controller, that you are focusing on public in the European Union to have to apply the European General Data Protection Regulation. So even if you are hidden away in some island or in the north of America or somewhere else, you have to comply on the General Data Protection Regulation. Will it be easy to enforce? That's another question, but the principle is there. So I think that it is very important. Every citizen in Europe who is living in Europe is protected by the General Data Protection Regulation, even when the threat is coming from outside. So that is, second, I think, a very important achievement. And the last and the third, and maybe the most important one, is a very strange one, is the fact that everybody now has discovered data protection as a concept. We have already a lot of legislation from the 80s, Convention 108, from the 90s, from the directive, but everybody seems to forget all these things. Only a few lawyers and congressmen know that, but everybody today is aware of the fact that on the 25th of May there is a new area. Of course, it is a little bit exaggerated because this area was already existing, but it was not really in the mindset of the public sector, not in the mindset of the private sector, and now it is. It is this extremely buzz for us for a while, but it is important that this is a sort of a waking up call for everybody that data protection, that privacy is a fundamental right, and that is maybe the biggest achievement of the General Data Protection Regulation.
And where would you say are the main challenges and chances regarding the e-privacy regulation?
Well, the first big challenge is that we need a new electronic privacy regulation. And it is a deception for me to see that they will not be ready on the 25th of May, because 2 years ahead everybody was saying, okay, it will be a piece of cake because it's only to concretize the principles of the General Data Protection Regulation, and we have already a directive from 2002 who had been rewritten in 2009, so we only have to adopt the last version 2009, and we shall achieve that in a few months. The reality is that it is not working like that. And we see that when we are coming to concretize the principles of the General Data Protection Regulation in a specific sector, electronic communication, that we are facing a lot of new discussions and that a lot of stakeholders are really very far away one from the other solution. There is the general call of the whole communication world, the professionals, to get more insight, to get free access to metadata and so on. There is, on the other hand, the data protection authorities who say no, communication should be secret, it should be kept secret. Also metadata are very important and they are also given a lot of intrusional effects. So, and then you have the legislator who is on one hand the parliament who is saying a strong protection. We see that the Commission is in between somewhere, and the Council, they are divided. There are countries who are saying strong protection, but most of them are saying no, we have to protect our industry, we have to protect our stakeholders on the electronic communication world, we have to give possibility to new types of industry, of commerce and so on. So it's very difficult nowadays to see where it will be landed, what will be the result. And at a certain stage we have to come to a final solution, because now we have a sort of cohabitation between the General Data Protection Regulation on the one hand and on the other hand the directive, the old directive, well old, 9 years old, but you see that there is a struggle between them. So I hope that we shall land somewhere in between. I think that we can find a solution who is acceptable for every stakeholder in the whole discussion.
And what would your advice be for data protection officers? What is there to do now?
Data protection officers, I think that the first thing that they have to do now is to impose themselves in the organizations, administrations, companies where they have to work. That means that they should be very flexible, that they should be very careful in listening to everybody, not only the commercial side, not only the advertisements people, but also the lawyers of the company and the data protection authorities. A data protection officer is a communicator. It's not only a lawyer, it's not only an ICTer, it's not only part of the organization, but it's also a communicator towards the public, towards the data protection authority. So I think it's one of the most important task for a data protection officer to have these communication skills and to talk with everybody in the company, to talk with the public, to talk with the data protection authority, to talk with the management, and therefore you need that you are accepted, that you can impose yourself, and it's not an easy task because as a data protection officer, you are not always the guy or the woman who is coming with successes. You say, hey, you cannot do that, think on that. So it's not easy for the data protection officer, but he or her has to make that he or her is accepted as in the company, in the organization, in the administration where they are working. So it means that on the communication side, a lot of work has to be done to do that. Yeah.
How can a conference like that maybe help for some of the communication skills or for some of the solving of problems?
Well, such conferences are very important because on that moment it is really the moment that the data protection officer is not alone. He is here with a lot of his colleagues. He can talk, he can exchange experiences. They can know each other to share after the conference, share experiences, but also new challenges. How have you solved that? How is it possible? So I think it's a very important thing, and one of when I think that communication is very important, it's not only communication towards data protection authorities into the company, but also with your peers, that you have to come together and to find solutions together for the problems that you are confronted with. Of course, it's sometimes difficult because we are coming from different sectors. I just have given a lecture who is much more on the world of policing and judiciary. Of course, there are a lot of people who are not confronted with these difficulties, but it's important, I think, to exchange all this experience and to see, okay, I'm not alone. I have to impose myself, so I'm alone in all this company. But there are a lot of people who are working and who are facing the same problems and who have the same profession. And yes, that can empower the data protection officer. So a conference can empower also the skills and also the position of a data protection officer.